Thank you very much, Ed. It's always a pleasure to be here at the forecast. I see old friends and even some students in the audience, and that's always good. It's also a pleasure to follow Mickey Cantor. Unfortunately, Mickey had to leave, but I'm going to react briefly to what he said, and then I'm going to move to a different set of issues that are related to what he said, but are focused on a different part of trade and the international arena. So let me say a couple of things with respect to what Cantor said. The first one is that, as opposed to him, I am a free trader. I am a great believer in free trade. I think that if countries have free trade, everything else follows. You cannot be a real free trading country and have high inflation, have lots of regulations, have screwed up laws, have large deficits. Any of those misguided policies will run against the wall of free trade, and you're going to have to give up free trade. So if we have free trade, everything else follows, and that's one of the main reasons why, as opposed to Mickey Cantor, I am a free trader. I was in agreement with most of the things that Mickey said, but I think that, unfortunately, as I said, he left. We have to add some caveats and some color just to understand the challenges ahead of us. It is true that we need large, big, over-encompassing pacts in order to further free trade, including labor agreements and issues related to corruption. But let me tell you that we have to do a lot of work in this country with respect to both of those areas. In terms of labor agreements, the U.S. is, among the countries in the world, the one that has ratified the fewest treaties by the International Labor Office. Now, of course, we argue that we don't need to do that because we're better than them, but that doesn't fly in the international arena or in trade negotiations. When it comes to corruption, if you look at the index by the very respected Transparency International organization, the U.S. is not ranked number 1 as the least corrupt country, nor 2, 3, 4, 5. We are ranked number 19, in a virtual tie with Chile, a country far away from the U.S., small and poor, a country that is quite close to my heart, but we are not different from Chile in terms of corruption. So we are basically with the best of the Latin American countries, number 19. We are not doing what needs to be done, and we have challenges ahead of us. And I think that Mickey Cantor was right when he pointed that made those arguments. But it's not only that we have to enforce them on others. We should also work on that, because if we don't, we're not going to be successful in these trade agreements and negotiations. So what I'd like to do is talk about something that is slightly different from what Mickey Cantor did, but it's as important when it comes to trade and international competitiveness. And the other difference between his remarks and my remarks is that mine, I think, are going to be more forward-looking, and I'm going to look into history. He started with 1993, which is 20 years ago, and I would like to go to maybe 20 years into the future and ask a number of questions in that regard. And the starting point of my presentation is this term that you may have read about in the papers, called the currency wars. It's a term that was coined by Guido Mantega, the finance minister of Brazil, and it refers to the war, or the battle, between the U.S. and China, mostly, in order to control or to gain greatest market shares. And they are trying to do this by using as the main weapon in this currency wars, or in this global war, the manipulation of currencies. And the view that Mantega and others have taken, how do we make this move? There we go. The way we make, that's a Chinese renminbi, the way this works, and at the center of this currency wars is the notion that countries that weaken their currency, that have a weaker currencies, have an advantage in the international marketplace. As your currency becomes weaker, you can lower the price of your exports in foreign currency and gain market shares. And what the Brazilians and others have said is that the US and China, approximately 40% of the world's GDP, are engaged in this war trying to weaken their currencies. And we threaten to label them as currency manipulators. And they threaten to unload in the marketplace the trillions of treasuries that they own, that have helped us run very large deficits. And the 40% of the world trying to weaken its currency has a flip side. That means that the rest of the world is experiencing stronger currencies, and that is pricing them out of the market. Now, the Brazilians and others are extremely alarmed because in the last few weeks, the Japanese have joined the currency wars. And now we have a new phenomenon that we have to watch in the world economy called Abe-enomics, after Prime Minister Abenomics, or Abe Abenomics, in Japan, that changed the governor of the Bank of Japan and gave him precise instructions to create a greater liquidity in the country and thus continue the weakening of the yen that we have seen in the last few years. Now, people that have looked at that have been concerned about the way in which markets, central banks have behaved, and in particular the way in which the Fed and Bernd Bernanke, who doesn't look very happy there, has been pursuing the different QE policies. And I have there a cruise, that's the Queen Elizabeth. In many presentations a few years back when I talked about QE2, people thought that I was talking about a cruise and say, oh, Sebastian, I'm so glad you're going on a cruise. No, I'm saying that's quantitative easing. That's the policy that the Fed has been following, which makes it look like a banana republic central bank. Here you have the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, and as you can see, it is growing at a very gradual, slow rate. It's doing what it's supposed to do until 2008, which is to grease the wheels of commerce by providing enough liquidity so that we have growth and prosperity, but not enough as to create inflation. And then the crisis comes. And if I had shown you this picture and I would have told you this is the Federal Reserve, I would have shown you this picture, say, 10 years ago, you would have said, Professor, you mislabeled that slide. That may be Argentina or Chavez, Venezuela, or some like banana republic type country. It cannot be the Federal Reserve. But there you have it. The Federal Reserve has tripled its balance sheet, and that has created a tremendous amount of USD liquidity. And the European Central Bank has done something similar by providing $3 trillion of euro loans to Eurozone banks in particular, and mostly Spanish banks. The Bank of England has not stayed too much behind, and now they have a new governor coming from Canada that has said that he will pursue that policy, and now the Bank of Japan. All of this has resulted in a weakening of the dollar, which is very, very important. Mickey Cantor didn't mention this, but I'm sure that he would agree with me. And here we see the index of the dollar adjusted by inflation relative to a basket of currencies from the rest of the world. This index is calculated by JP Morgan, and you can see that it has ups and downs, but it is near its lowest point ever. It has declined by 24% since 2002 and by 12% since 2008. So it came down between 2002 and 2008. Then we had the crisis, and it recovered quite a bit. That's the improvement that you can see over there. And now it's on the way back again. The other side of this behavior, as I said, is the tremendous strengthening of other currencies. And here I have 4 examples of what we call commodity currencies. We have Australia, We have Brazil, which is absolutely remarkable. The value of the Brazilian real has doubled since 2005. Today, Sao Paulo is one of the, if not the most expensive city in the world. We have Chile, a country that is as little corrupt as the U.S., as I pointed out. And I will continue to point out that for the foreseeable future until Chile surpasses the U.S., and then I will stop. And we have Peru, where we're taking a group of students to drink pisco sour and learn about the Peruvian economy during the spring break. But you can see that with good reason, these countries are very, very concerned about what's going on in the international arena and in currency markets. Now, if one takes a historical perspective, this is not a new phenomenon. In fact, it happened during the interwar years between 1919 and 1939. And in fact, some historians say that a very similar phenomenon was one of the seeds of the Nazis coming to power in Germany. And at that time, that phenomenon had a different name. It was not called currency wars. It was called competitive devaluations. And Lord Keynes, arguably the most or one of the two most influential economists of the 20th century, and we see him here on the cover of Time magazine, wrote quite extensively about competitive devaluations and the harm that they were doing to the world economy at that time. As I said, it was considered to be such a serious problem where countries were trying to devalue their currencies and compete for a weaker currency in order to gain market share that some historians believe that, as I said, it was a kernel of the Nazis coming to power and of World War II. So the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, was created in 1944 as an institution that would make sure that there would be no more competitive devaluations. And here we are now 60 years later, and we are in the midst of a very similar run from the one that we had in the interwar periods, or the one that resulted in the creation of the IMF. So what are the consequences, or the possible consequences, of the currency wars? Well, it's that nothing of what Mickey Cantor would like to see will happen. When you have currency wars and countries manipulate their currencies, or currencies move in a way that hurt some countries, those countries react by enacting protectionist policies. Protectionist policies that can take the form of barriers to imports. So we cannot export if as the U.S., we cannot export if the Brazilians forbid imports coming in from the U.S., or in the form of export subsidies, which are illegal under the WTO, but they always find ways of getting around that, or in the form of regulations or bad business practices. And we're seeing now that in a number of countries, there are indeed protectionist policies being put in place, both for goods, but most important for capital movement. And we're seeing in Europe the imposition of a tax on capital flows, the so-called Tobin tax. The Brits are opposing it and are quite scared about it because they think that the city is going to lose prominence if that happens. We are opposing it, but it may actually move forward. So I think if we think about the future, it is not a given that international trade will continue to expand at the rate at which it has expanded. In fact, I think that this is bad because, as I told you, I'm a free trader. It is possible that we will see a halt in the move towards freer trade. I don't think that we're going to go back to the era of great protectionism, but we are not going to move forward in the direction of free trade. Now, this leaves us with an additional question, which is a very important one, which is what is the future of the US dollar in this whole story? And I would say that among economists, the prevailing view is that since Bernanke has been creating money, printing USDs, as if there was no future, behaving like the Wizard of Oz in a way, or the governor of, as I said, a banana republic central bank, what is going to happen is unavoidable, which is that the dollar will lose value. If you increase the supply of something, the price goes down if the demand doesn't grow in an offsetting way. So many people think that, hold on, many people think that this is the future of the USD. I have looked at this with a great care, and my perspective is that it's not going to happen for a number of reasons. The demise of the USD has been announced for a very, very long time. It was first announced by these two gentlemen. The gentleman on the left is General de Gaulle. He used to be the president of France. He's now an airport, as you may know. But he used to be the president of France. And the gentleman on the right is his then Prime Minister, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, who then became the president of France. And they said that the US had an exorbitant privilege because we could print international money, and no other country could. And they then tried to bring that that exorbitant privilege to an end in the late 1960s and early 1970s, and they were the forces, the malevolent forces, behind the devaluation of the dollar on August 15th of 1971, when President Nixon took the dollar off gold, off the dollar off gold, and the long era of $35 per ounce of gold came to an end. But in spite of that, since then, the USD has continued to be the most important currency, the reserve currency, and the vehicle currency in the world. And I think that, and with this I end in a note of some optimism, in spite of the currency wars, in spite of the spike in the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, the US dollar in the next 10 or maybe even 20 years will not be replaced by another currency. One of the reasons for that, of course, is that in order for the USD to be replaced by another currency, we have to find another currency that would do the job. And if you go through the list of candidates, you will go through that, you will very quickly say, no, 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 no. Let me very briefly go through that list. The euro, no. No. Especially if George Soros has his way. He wants to throw Germany out of the euro. He came with a brilliant idea, George Soros, who is a smart fellow. He's made a little money. He said, everyone is wrong by arguing that Greece should be thrown out of the euro. What we should do is throw Germany out of the euro. So if he has his way, can you imagine a euro without Germany, which is the anchor? So that euro, or not even the current euro, will replace the USD. The yen with Abenomics, no. The Swiss franc is a good candidate. The Swiss are the ones that have done the most trying to avoid the collateral damage of the currency wars. The Swiss franc has strengthened very, very significantly, and the Swiss central bank has started intervening, and they have bought dollars in an amount that is staggering, equivalent to 1.5 times their GDP. This is as if the Fed had intervened in the currency markets, buying $15 trillion or $16 trillion relative to our size. That's unthinkable for our country. This is what the Swiss are doing. The Swiss franc is a good candidate, but it's too small a currency. That leaves sterling, the Bank of England being run by a Canadian for the next 5 years? No. And that leaves the renminbi, and it's not going to happen. China is a great country. It has a great future. It has astonished us and will continue to surprise us, but it's not ready to really take the lead, in my view, in this view. The second reason is that our trade deficit, or our current account deficit, has shrunk very significantly. I gave a talk here at the Forecast a few years back, indeed, around this time, when we were all alarmed. The trade deficit, our economy by that time was only $10 trillion in total size, and the current account deficit was almost $1 trillion, 10% of GDP, which that is really Banana Republic type of data. That has now turned around. Our economy is a $16 trillion economy, and the deficit is around $450 billion. which is perfectly fine in terms of how things go. Here you see the deficit as a percentage of GDP. It has shrunk. That means that there's no need for great or the market will not push, in my view, a great depreciation of the dollar. And finally, the total indebtedness, global indebtedness of the U.S., which we call the net international investment position of the country, is negative. We became a debtor country in 1986, for those of you that didn't know that. The most powerful country in the world, we should be a creditor nation, we are a debtor nation. And that happened in 1986. This is the net international indebtedness, 1986. But it has now stabilized at less than 20% of GDP. So our data on the trade side don't look so bad as some people think, or as they looked a few years back. So the dollar, in my view, will survive. It will continue to be the center of the international financial system. This will require that Bernanke's successor, remember, Ben's term comes to an end in February, so his successor does the right thing and mops up the excess liquidity at the right time, and I think that they will be able to do that. And I think that we're going to have a lot of volatility in the short term when it comes to currencies, but in the long term, we're going to be okay. The dollar will continue to be at the center of the system, and the U.S., for a variety of reasons, is going to become a stronger economy in the years to come. And I'm going to end, Ed, with a bonus here, with a forecast at 12 years forward. My prediction is that 12 years from now, we are going to see $12 a barrel WTI oil. From the current value, it's going to go back to $12 per barrel in 12 years. And that was the value that it had in 1998 when Hugo Chavez came into power. So we're going to come, the cycle is going to come on around, and we're going to go to a world, at least with respect to some things, including the oil market, the world the way it looked before Hugo Chavez came into power. Thank you very much.